Hey everybody, Marcus here. A young man had left a comment on a few of my videos reaching out for help in dealing with his suicidal disposition brought on by a particularly unremitting emotional attachment to a girl. He submitted this request to quite a number of other MGTOW content creators. Some have already responded to his plea for help through either video or comment form. This video is my contribution in hopefully helping him overcome his situation. His comment reads as follows: I am very suicidal over this Naywalt girl I have severe Oneitis for, and am in dire need of some MGTOW help and input from a MGTOW mentor such as yourself. This may be a little long-winded, but bear with me. I am truly in dire straits and have even attempted suicide over this girl. I have a video request that you look at the cause of and actionable solutions of Oneitis. I am severely depressed and suicidal over a Canadian-Irish girl I knew from grade 10 of high school. She was the first girl I truly loved, and I emotionally invested so much in her, it left me irrevocably traumatized. I still present many behaviors symptomatic of PTSD from this ordeal. My Oneitis has driven me to the point of attempting suicide. As much as I can intellectually accept AWOLT as a way of debunking Oneitis, she is a very mature only child with a ton in common and the strongest connection I've ever had with another person. Her NAWALT status, especially compared to the cesspool of other women out there, is nigh on impossible to demote and depedestalize when I've been close to her for 3 years and she stands out from every other female of any age group I've ever interacted with in her self-awareness, genuine character, and altruistic demeanor. How do I go about getting over this Oneitis, having driven me to the verge of suicide, not least when the scarcity of these types of human beings is driven into you and she truly is a needle in a Canadian-Irish haystack? The Canadian-Irish girl I refer to is 18, as am I. Her accent, laugh, smile, way she does her mousy blonde hair, thoughtfulness, reserved nature, feminine body language, and coyness. Everything about her character, personality, and physicality I have the Nawalt Oneitis lens on, with her topped off with such sheer amount in common and similarities between us, and it felt like the one that I can never invest this much emotionally ever again due to the utter and absolute emotional damage incurred to the point of suicidality and entirely lacking a will to live without her, the unrequited love of my life. P.S. This information is truly vital to my personal well-being and safety, as I am legitimately very suicidal over this Canadian-Irish virgin of 18, and am thus in dire need of a how-to handbook to demote her from her severely ingrained NAWALT status and overcome my incredibly unremitting acute severe case of Oneitis ASAP. It is truly imperative, as I am so close to the edge, in truth. Tom. Now, before I proceeded in producing this video for Tom, I asked him as to his religious views. I find that it is important to work within the belief system of someone as far as matters of life and death are concerned. Tom replied that he is a Buddhist. Now, this reply caught me slightly off guard at first. The reason for this is that Buddhism contains within its tenets and practices all the tools that Tom would need to deal with his problem. However, I also understand that he might be new to Buddhist practices and so might not have yet had the opportunity or mentorship to show him that he is already on the path to his own healing. Now, other content creators who would address Tom's situation will surely reaffirm several common MGTOW talking points that are pertinent to this case. This video, however, will not be doing any of that. Tom, what I want to do for you is to help you understand what is happening to you from within the Buddhist framework. As you are already somewhat committed to this path, I would like to spend some time going through how Buddhism can help with your situation. However, as I do not know how well you are familiar with Buddhism, I will need to start from the beginning. In addition to this, I want to tell you the Buddhist story as it pertains to death. You have expressed that you have become suicidal due to this girl. As this is the case, you must have concluded that death is preferable to a life without this girl. During this video, we will not only discover the Buddhist tools you need to deal with your immediate suffering, the tools to deal with your long-term recovery, but also with what suicide would entail within Buddhist teaching. However, it should be noted that this video, as well as any other YouTube content, should not serve as your sole or authoritative source of help. You must seek help in the real world. You must share what you are going through with your parents or friends or someone who can physically help you, or simply sit with you in your darker moments. There is no shame in asking for help about this issue, any more so than there's shame in asking for help with moving a heavy piece of furniture. Some things may sometimes be beyond the ability of one person to carry on their own. All that I can do is extend to you the extent of my experience and knowledge. In that light, let me share with you what I can. The Buddhist tradition was established in significant part as a result of the first encounter by a young prince with the realities of aging, sickness, and death. The story of that encounter, which is well known to Buddhists around the world, is a fitting place to begin our exploration of Buddhism. The prince at the center of the story is Siddhartha Gautama, later known to the world as the Buddha. Born in what is now known as Nepal, near the northeast border with India, Siddhartha lived his first 29 years enjoying comfort and pleasure thanks to an overprotective father who received a prophecy that his son would either grow up to be a king like himself or a religious teacher. By surrounding his son with nothing but beauty and leisure, the king assumed that Siddhartha would never want to leave the royal life. But eventually, Siddhartha made it outside the palace and saw three things that would change his life. First, he saw an old man. Then, he encountered a man stricken by severe illness. Finally, he came upon a corpse. Having never before encountered old age, illness, or death in his sheltered life, Siddhartha was shocked and disturbed by what he saw. The prince was most puzzled by the dead person, who, though dressed well, was utterly still and stiff and was followed by people in distress mourning him. Siddhartha asked, "Is this state of being peculiar to this man? Or is such the end of all man?" He was told that death is certain for all. Deeply shaken, Siddhartha could never again return to the blissful ignorance and complacency of the palace. Siddhartha had also encountered wandering renunciants on his journey, mendicants who left the world behind to pursue liberation. Siddhartha became one of them. He committed himself to solve the ultimate existential problem of aging, sickness, and death, particularly the problem of samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. Siddhartha decided to pursue not wealth or power, but liberation. His rejection of his life of luxury has become known as the Great Renunciation. We might ask, how is it possible that a person can live for 29 years and never know about aging, sickness, and death? Well, we do not need to take the story literally to understand its power. I would contend that young people know in an abstract intellectual way that they will ultimately get old and that death is unavoidable. At the same time, most young people operate under a myth of immortality. Most people understand death in the abstract, but that is quite different from truly understanding that I am going to die. This realization might not come until much later in life. After all, there are many things that change about a person as they age. It is not only the effects of experience that weigh upon their disposition, but also the very tool of interfacing with reality. The body changes. Tom, you can understand how radically different your perspective is today than it was when you were 10 years old. It is certain that those things you enjoyed at the age of 10, you now find unfathomable to continue to do today. Simply put, you are no longer the sort of human being that is capable of enjoying childish things. You can no longer sit through the childish television shows or play tag or hide and seek. These shows and games have not changed, but you have, and you will never return to the state of being the sort who will enjoy those childish things again. These sorts of radical changes will happen to you again. The shift in your very being that will happen to you by the time you are 30 years old will have you looking back on your 18-year-old self in wonder how you ever found any of the things you currently do and think were possible. To put these changes into a metaphor, imagine this. Imagine that at the age of 10, the only senses you had were those of smell, taste, and touch. At 18, you gain the sense of hearing. At 30, you will gain the sense of sight. This is how radical these shifts are as you age. But let us return to our story. For some people, death's existential reality hits them when they lose a loved one, deal with a serious illness, or have a near death experience. They're jolted out of their metaphorical sheltered palace, and with a shock of realization, understand how fleeting our time is. Some people try to bury this awareness, fleeing into distraction. But Siddhartha plunged directly into it. Before he left the palace, his father pleaded with him to stay. Siddhartha replied that he would give up his plan to become an ascetic if he had four guarantees. 1. That my life would not be committed to death. 2. That my health would not be overcome by disease. 3. That my youth would not be marred by old age. And 4. That my prosperity would not be taken away by disaster. In other words, Siddhartha could only stay in the comfort of the palace if he knew that he would never have to experience suffering and loss, as life gives no such guarantees. In fact, it guarantees the opposite. Siddhartha left that very night. During his period of dedicated meditative and ascetic practice in the forest, Siddhartha learned a number of different techniques that he believed might provide liberation from suffering. These were techniques for absorption meditation, meditation in which senses and thoughts are shut down and ultimately the activities of the body and mind cease entirely. In a sense, this does provide freedom from suffering. After all, attaining pure stillness does not allow for any agitation. But there are two problems with such states. First, they simply amount to insentience. If you think about it, how could one in such a state can really be alive? The second problem is that these states are temporary. Sooner or later, one emerges from such states, and there is the world again, and your problems in it. When you come out of this state, you enter a world characterized by suffering and loss. This type of meditation provides only a short-term refuge. Siddhartha wanted to find a path to be free from suffering in the midst of life itself, and this is exactly what he found. Next, we will talk about what the Buddha discovered, particularly the teachings which are most relevant to the subject of death. Siddhartha's awakening, the title Buddha, after all, means awakened one, was a realization of the nature and cause of suffering and the way out. In his very first teaching, he puts this discovery in terms of what would become the most well-known formulation of Buddhist thought, the Four Noble Truths. The first of these truths is what we already know. Life, as we ordinarily live it, is characterized by suffering, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. The word that he used is dukkha, which is often translated as suffering. However, this is a problematic translation. When the Buddha said that life is dukkha, he did not mean that at each moment we are in obvious pain of some kind. After all, plenty of moments are pleasant and joyful. What he meant was that we are never fully content, that there is always some underlying dissatisfaction to life. Why? Because even when things are going well, we are aware unconsciously or consciously that things will change. Anything we have, any person we love, can be lost. Objects break. People leave us or die. Illness or accident is an ever-present possibility. We are haunted by the fact that our fortunes can change at any time. And in the first noble truth, we come to see the first Buddhist lesson as it pertains to your situation, Tom. Your current suffering is also impermanent, as are any feelings you have for this girl. Yet there is another consequence to this. Even if it were the case that you ended up with this girl, so too would that relationship be impermanent. This relationship would not exist in a continuously static manner as you may imagine it would. Not only would your feelings change, due in part to the radical existential shift that happens when you near your 30s, but also in that this girl would change herself. Anything you imagine you two have in common today is but accidental. As time went on, neither you nor her will have any of the interests both of you have now. What would happen is a drift in interests. It is near universal that over a long period of time, both parties in a relationship discover that though having near to everything in common at the start, no longer hold a single thing in common by the end. You and this girl are little more than travelers who happen to be at a common airport for a layover waiting for your next flight. Once your planes arrive, so too will your common interests take different flights. Now, if one were to object to the Buddhist characterization of life as dukkha by saying, "But I'm perfectly happy now," he should be asked if it is possible that he could receive a phone call that would rip the foundations out from under him and destroy his happiness. We all must admit that such a phone call is possible. We all must admit that our moments of joy and pleasure are fragile and can be easily taken away. And so, in this way, you too, Tom, would be the man who, entering into this relationship, would be claiming that you are now happy, only to find that, as MGTOW clearly demonstrates when it comes to women, that phone call will one day come. Two of the characteristics of reality for Buddhists are impermanence and dukkha, and we can see why these are so closely intertwined. As nothing is permanent, there's nothing we can hold on to. We will never be completely secure and content, and life will continue to be unsatisfactory. It sounds bad, but this is only the first noble truth. The second noble truth teaches that there is a cause to dukkha. It is not an inevitable feature of the world. The cause of dukkha is the mind's grasping and attachment to things. Since everything is impermanent, the quest for what is permanent is bound to fail and will itself be the source of suffering. So the key is not to try to find what is permanent, as that will never work. The key is to stop holding on, to loosen our grasp, and to let go. We must learn not to cling to things, to people, to ideas. This clinging is the source of greed, the lust for power, hatred, anger, and, of course, as in your case, Tom, the suffering of an unrequited love. If we change the mind's habit of grasping, we are freed from these things. The third noble truth is the promise that this freedom is attainable. It's the assurance that the cessation of dukkha, the extinguishing of greed and anger, is possible. The experience of this is what is known as nirvana. The very term nirvana itself comes from a root meaning to extinguish or to blow out. It refers to the elimination of what are known as the three fires or three poisons: passion, aversion, and ignorance. The fourth noble truth shows us the path to this freedom. It is called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is a set of behaviors that will help to extinguish dukkha. The Eightfold Path can be divided into three categories: right thought, namely, understanding what the Buddha taught; right affects and conduct; and finally, right meditation, which means the cultivation of the mind and eliminating negative mental habits. If Buddhist practice means cultivating the art of letting go, then it seems as the ideal solution to helping you rid of your Oneitis, Tom. In addition to dukkha and impermanence, Buddhists subscribe a third characteristic of reality: Atman, or no self. Hindus, in their own way, solve the problem of impermanence and suffering. Namely, find that which is permanent and enduring. Find that which is outside of all change and therefore cannot suffer. They discovered this in the Atman, namely, the soul, which is reborn into a new body in life after life until liberation. In Hinduism, once one realizes one's true identity as Atman, which is itself divine, one is freed from identification with the impermanent, suffering body and mind. The Buddha rejected this solution. He taught that meditation reveals something else. Unlike absorption meditation, which shuts out the world, the Buddha developed what we call mindfulness meditation. This is a way of looking deeply and clearly at the world rather than shutting it out. This leads to insights about the nature of reality by allowing the meditator to observe calmly, without judgment, all phenomena that arise, both within one's mind, so thoughts, emotions, and memories, and in the outside world. Namely, as all of the sensations that bombard us daily. One learns to observe these phenomena without getting attached to them. They arise and then pass. In this way, one directly experiences the truth of impermanence. Tom, here we have the two meditative practices that ought to be cultivated for both short-term and long-term gains. When you find yourself entering into a state of despair, Apply absorption meditation. Purge yourself completely by shutting down all your cognitive faculties. However, in moments of relative peace, practice mindfulness to slowly rewire your brain so it no longer haunts you with any thoughts of this girl through past memories or fantasies of some future with her. Now, here's where we get to the truth of no self. The Buddha taught that when we look deeply, we find that no stable, unchanging self exists. We construct a notion of ourselves in our minds. In fact, that is all identity is, a construction. We create an I separate from the world, a subject over and against a world of objects. The Buddhist challenge is this: if you claim that there is something unchanging about you, a permanent self or soul, then where is it? How do we find it? Think about it. What about you does not change over time? Your body is radically different from what it was when you were a child. In fact, in subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways, your body is changing constantly, even at the cellular level. Our minds are even more volatile. With our thoughts and emotions changing rapidly throughout the day, there's nothing that does not change, and nothing about us is completely separate from the world. Every time you breathe or eat, the border between you and the world is exposed as permeable. So rather than a stable, enduring, separate self, we are a dynamic series of processes in an ongoing, interdependent relationship with the world. Here's one important element on the Buddhist perspective on death. If we do not have a separate self to begin with, what does death really take from us? If we can see past the illusion of an enduring, unchanging self, thus freeing ourselves from clinging to ourselves, we will be able to accept dying as one more series of changes. Might it be possible that, in a deep sense, as we look at death, we discover that we have nothing, no thing, to lose? The concepts of dukkha, impermanence, and no self, along with the notion of liberation and the meditative path to realizing it, are the keys to understanding the Buddhist approach to death. Now, let us look at the concept of samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. Like Hindus, Buddhists believe in samsara, and thus samsara is driven by karma. Your intentions and actions plant what will in some way come to fruition and affect you, either in this life or in the future. Buddhists generally believe that there are 6 possible realms of rebirth. One of these is the human realm. Just below the human realm is the realm of the animals, whose lives are largely concerned with survival. Below them is the realm of the hungry ghosts, who are portrayed with large bellies but tiny mouths and throats, ensuring that they will be permanently unsatisfied. At the lowest level are the hell realms, where those who have done the most evil are tormented. Above the human realm are 2 other realms. The lower of these is the realm of beings called Asuras, who are sometimes conceived of as demigods or titans, deities who contend with each other and struggle with envy and desire for power. The Asuras are somewhat like the Greek gods. As the Asuras are more powerful than humans and are said to have more pleasurable lives, they are considered higher, but their lives are certainly not peaceful. At the highest realm are the Devas. These are the contented deities who live blissfully. It is important to keep in mind that all these realms are temporary. The beings in each realm are only there until the karma that put them there is burned off, at which point they will move to a new destination. While some Buddhists might aspire to a better rebirth on the wheel of life, perhaps to be a wealthier, more comfortable human being, or a contented deva, the ultimate goal is to get off of the cycle altogether and attain nirvana. One question that Buddhists who believe in these realms as actual locations have to answer is this: if there's no self, then what gets reborn in life after life? There are different approaches to answering this question, but here's one common metaphor. If I have a lit candle, and then I use its flame to light another candle, and then the first flame is extinguished, is the second flame the same or different than the first? Well, the answer seems to be neither. They are not identical, but not completely different. And such is it with human beings. We are not exactly the same person from life to life, in the same way that we are not exactly the same from childhood to adulthood, or year to year, or day to day. So, one way to think of our lives is as continuity without identity. In the candle example, the energy of the first flame gave rise to the existence of the second, so the two are linked through time in a chain of causality. This is the case with humans too. There's a chain of continuity, a karmic chain of causes and conditions that leads from the infant you to the adolescent you to the current you. So, when you die, the karmic inheritance from your life gives rise to a new you. But through it all, there is no unchanging, enduring element. The Buddha gave a detailed account of mindfulness meditation. The basic approach is to sit in a stable posture. For example, many monks sit in the lotus posture or some variation. Once you are in this stable posture, you are to observe the movement of your breath as it comes into and out of your body. As you try to keep your attention on your breath, a flood of thoughts and memories of the past, plans and anxieties about the future will demand and often carry off your attention. With a great deal of practice, you will learn to observe all of these things without clinging to them and return your attention to your breath. In the Satipatthana Sutra, the foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha has a group of monks direct their awareness at a decomposing corpse. Now, it would be difficult to do this in many Western countries today. Most of the time, when someone dies, the corpse is swiftly taken away by a funeral director to a morgue. In any case, the corpse is hidden from view and either rapidly buried or artificially preserved from decay. But this was not the case in the ancient world. It is also not the case with YouTube videos or with dead animal carcasses found as roadkill by the sides of highways. It is also still not the case in many parts of the developing world, including India even today. The Buddha taught that there are important lessons in the close observation of a decaying corpse. He said, just as a monk sees a body dead 1, 2, or 3 days, swollen, blue, and festering, thrown onto the cemetery, so he applies this perception to his own body thus: verily, my own body too is of the same nature. Such it will become and will not escape it. This not only includes an unflinching description of the physical reality of decomposition, it also reminds us not to see this corpse as another, but as one's own inevitable future state. One must identify oneself with that corpse, and ultimately with skeleton. Tom, you need to take note that this festering, swollen, blue corpse overrun with maggots is what your Canadian Irish girl ultimately becomes. Load a time-lapsed video of a decaying corpse on YouTube. Give it your undivided attention. That is your Canadian Irish girl. Is that what you think is worth killing yourself over? We have seen how skeletons play an important role in art all over the world as a reminder of mortality. Well, here, monks make use of actual skeletons. Bones can be found in some monasteries for this very reason. Now, why does mindfulness meditation work? Well, first, it shows us that most, if not all, of our suffering is self-inflicted. This takes the form of regrets of past mistakes, fears about the future, the anger and frustrations over our failures, sorrow stemming from unrequited love, and so many other painful aspects of our lives are produced by the mind. If the mind can be transformed, the suffering will end. When we pay attention to our minds, we find that they spend a surprising percentage of the time somewhere other than where our bodies are. Our bodies and breath are always here in the present, but our minds spend large amounts of time revisiting the past, speculating about the future, or visiting fantasy realms that we create. Like you, Tom, imagining some sort of future with this particular girl. Some of this can be quite important and fruitful. However, much of the time, it is the source of a great amount of unnecessarily destructive suffering. The anger produced by revising a past argument, the anxiety about a future situation that may or may not occur, The fantasy of fulfilling our greedy, sexual, or romantic desires, or getting revenge on someone. All of these bring about suffering. The suffering will be our own, but also often others through the operations of our own minds. Bringing the mind back to the present moment, the experience of the body and breath, being able to observe these moments of the mind from the stable platform of centered awareness diminishes the power of the negative thoughts and emotions. We identify less and less with these destructive patterns of the mind as we identify more and more with the calm, spacious awareness that observes them. We see the truth of impermanence in dukkha for ourselves, providing insights into the nature of reality. We also cultivate the ability to stop clinging and to accept the reality of our situation. Though we can aim to make things better, of course, we must start from a recognition of reality, an acceptance of the way things are. Some things cannot be avoided. Now, the last aspect of the Buddhist teaching I want to cover directly is suicide. As the first precept of Buddhism is the prevention of the destruction of life, suicide generates negative karma. This means that if you kill yourself over this girl, you will be reborn in one of the lower realms. You will either come back as some animal, probably a cuckoo bird getting cucked, or a hungry ghost haunting some roller coaster in an abandoned theme park, or in the classical way, be tormented in hell until your karma burns off, of course. At some point, you might return to life as a human being. But here's an interesting caveat to that. Do you know how, upon the death of the Dalai Lama, a replacement is found? Well, they do not look for a replacement. They look for the reincarnated Dalai Lama in his new body. They had identified this reincarnation with a number of tests. The tests pertain to the retained memories that cross over the boundary of death. A child is found who is shown a collection of objects. Only one within the collection was actually owned by the Dalai Lama. If the child identifies the object, they run similar tests a number of times. Only when the child can successfully pass these tests a sufficient number of times are they satisfied that the reincarnated Dalai Lama has been found. This has an interesting consequence. You see, even if you were to return to a human form after your death, it may very well turn out to be the case that all these emotions you carry for this girl may carry over. As such, even post-death, you risk not freeing yourself of your suffering. As such, your only real option remains to work through the process of purging yourself of these feelings. Tom, there is no version of this story where you get the girl. Remember, within Buddhism, the goal is to achieve nirvana and not to end up with some woman. Keep your eye on the prize, Tom. Keep your eye on the prize. Thanks for listening. Go team.